Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone, and welcome to Notes from Nurhdyhaz. Welcome to the podcast. I really hope that everybody has been keeping well and safe, insyaAllah. And thank you so much for tuning in to another episode on this podcast. So, Alhamdulillah, insyaAllah, today is going to be a very exciting episode because it's the most exciting time of the year. Right now, we are in the first 10 days of Dhulhijjah, and that also constitute the best 10 days of the year, inshallah. And while the first 10 days of Dhulhijjah is the best 10 days of the year, I want you to know that the day of Arafah, which is coming up real soon on the 9th day of Dhulhijjah, just the day before the day of Hajj or the day of Eid al-Adha, that is in fact the best day of the year. So if you are familiar with Ramadan, how Laylatul Qadr or the night of decree is the best night of the year, then Arafah is actually the best day of the year, inshallah. And it really is beautiful because Yawm Arafah or the day of Arafah, as much as it is the most important day of the year, it is also known to be the day where you come to know your Lord, the day where you learn more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this happens every single year, and this has been made to be significant, right? Because Arafah in itself comes from the root word Arafah, to know. And as what our scholars have taught us, right, about the whole concept of man arafa rabbahu arafa nafsahu, man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu, right? So those who learn more, those who get to know more of their Lord, they will get to know more about themselves, and then those who learn more about themselves, right, they begin to know about their Lord or begin to know more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is also where we also find this concept of i'tarafa bi nafsihi wa dhanbihi ma Allah azza wa jal. So the more that we learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more that we learn about his perfection, that is where we learn more about ourselves, and that is where we learn more about our shortcoming as well. And I guess this is where we are led to acknowledge our perfect imperfections. We are led to also acknowledge our dire need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And of course, this comes with his great mercy, his great blessings. And while we acknowledge that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also blesses us with his help, with his guidance, with his mercy as well. So speaking about the 9th day of Dhulhijjah, also known as the day of Arafah, we also see what has been mentioned by Ibn Rajab, which is one of the profound scholars in Islam, where he said that Arafah is makan and zaman. So makan means a place, and then zaman means a time. So a place would refer to those who are doing their Hajj, those who are doing their pilgrimage, and we see that they are all gathered at the place of Arafah. But for us who are not performing the Hajj or the pilgrimage, we are also encouraged, right, to observe this best day of the year through being present at its time, at its moment. And this is beautiful, because if you think about it, 7 years before the Prophet ﷺ was given the opportunity to perform the Hajj or to perform the pilgrimage at the Kaaba or at Makkah, the Prophet ﷺ would always, every single year, fast on the day of Arafah to acknowledge its greatness and to acknowledge that it is actually the best day of the year. And the significance of his fasting is that it is to prove or to show his longing for the place of Arafah, to be standing in the day of Arafah on the place of Arafah itself. So it is definitely a beautiful time for us to also, inshallah, someday look forward to being able to be present at the day of Arafah, at the place of Arafah. But while we are not there yet, for some of us, right, myself included, then we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that opportunity, for that longing as well. And because it's so beautiful. We know when the day of Arafah is, we know when the best day of the year is, and that's on the 9th day of Dhulhijjah, as I mentioned earlier. So through here we are able to look forward to it. We are able to prepare for it. We are able to ensure that we make the most of it, as much as it is the best day of the year, inshallah. So it is the best day indeed. And I think one of the things that you have ought to know is that it is also the day, as mentioned in the Quran as well, it is also the day in which that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, it was also the day that it marked the moment where we actually stood in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the day where we took the oaths towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be created, to be worshipped, to take on the responsibility as the humankind or the human being that we are. And there is so much significance to this. Like if you relate it back to some of the prominent days that has been taught in our religion, like for example, Yawmil Ma'ud, which is known as the day that is promised, or the promised day. And this is actually referred to the day of judgment. But in order for that day to be a day that is promised, it comes with a day of witness that is called Al-Yawm Al-Shahid. And the day of witness is actually the Sayyidul Ayyam, or the best day of the week, and that is on the Friday. And we also have this concept of Al-Yawm Al-Mashhud. So Al-Yawm Al-Mashhud refers to the witness day, right? And that is actually the day of Arafah. So then again, the day of Arafah, the best day of the year, it is the day where we constantly call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is also a day where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls upon his angels to witness his servants, i.e. all of us insyaAllah, who will be invoking him, who will be glorifying him and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. MashaAllah. So going back right to the concept of Hajj. Okay, maybe for some of us, we might not be doing our Hajj this year, but in order for us to observe that, is to celebrate the day of Arafah as well. And if you just take a look at the concept of Hajj, right, it really brings us back to our pillars of Islam. It brings us back to how at the very beginning, right, the very first pillar of Islam is the Shahada, where we mention Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. So it's the testimony of faith. It is that symbolic idea or symbolic icon of purity. And at the end of it, which is the fifth pillar of Islam, we see Al-Hajj Arafah. Right, we see pilgrimage, right, being performed. And again, what's the concept of pilgrims, going for Hajj, going to the blessed lands or the holy lands? It's the concept of them returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their ihram clothes, right? And that is actually an enactment of death. When we die someday, inshallah, that is how we will be wrapped, right, in pieces of white clothing. And even through that, we also mentioned similar things that we mentioned during the Shahada, where we say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. So during Hajj, we would say La ilaha illallah or Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. So La ilaha illallah would mean that there is no God, right, that is worthy of worship other than Allah. And Labbaik Allahumma labbaik would mean, oh ya Allah, we are here, right, we are returning back to you, and we heed your calling. So again, it's this whole idea of responding to the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something that is done by the pilgrims, right, by the people who perform the Hajj. But as we observe the day of Arafah, as we observe Eid al-Adha, these are some of the things that we can do as well. So again, responding to the call of Allah, we affirm the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being in a state of undistracted by the world as it is. And we also recognize that our purpose is none other than to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are some things that I hope you can think about, and you can consider how you can incorporate, right, in your day as you experience the day of Arafah. It's coming, inshallah. It's literally right around the corner. So now is the best time to plan for it, so we are able to experience the best day ever, inshallah. Now, furthermore, what can we do on the day of Arafah? Sometimes we feel that there is so many things that we can do, so many narrations that we can recite. But amongst the things that I can share with you, hopefully these 5 things can be useful for you. So the very first one on what we can do on the day of Arafah, really one of the preparations even, is to make the intention. Right? Make the intention that, Ya Allah, on this day, I look forward to it. Ya Allah, on this day, I will make it the best day ever. Ya Allah, on this day, I'm going to worship you. I'm going to fast for you. I'm going to do all of the good deeds in order to please you. Because intentions are powerful, right? As the Prophet ﷺ mentions in Sahih Muslim, that when we create a certain intention, innamal a'malu binniyah وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. So when an intention is made, insyaAllah, it will be guided and it will be something that we will achieve at the end of the day, insyaAllah. So that's the first one. The second one is that I want you to think about, or I want you to decide on what is that one positive change that you'd like to work on and that you'd like to promise yourself, that you'd like to promise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to work on it for the rest of the year. So it's like kind of like a new year resolution, but usually resolutions are not long lasting. So I just want you to think about, in honor of this best day of the year, what's one thing that I can work on for the betterment so that I'm able to please my Lord, so that I'm able to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I do that, it brings, of course, positive change in my life, to myself, to my religion, and more importantly, when it is done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it becomes a means of worship, and we are able to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the process as well. Okay, now the third thing is for us to allow ourselves to start the day with remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And because it's the best day, is the day where we acknowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's greatness, I want you to think about how we can actually incorporate the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the beginning of the day. For example, from the start of our Fajr prayers and then down to when the day ends, right? And that will be right before when Maghrib happens. Because according to the Islamic calendar, right, a new day happens at the time of the Maghrib. And as we continue to fill our day with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I want you to also take that opportunity to constantly seek the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this best day. And this is actually quite prominent and important really, because the pursuit of seeking the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that we want to ask from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly. But because on that day we are constantly glorifying Allah, we are doing something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves greatly, and therefore his doors of forgiveness will be widely open for us. And if you take a look at one of the mentions, right, of our scholars, great pioneer, prominent scholars named Sufyan al-Thawri, he was asked about, what is the most matter of loss on that day, right, for the believers. And he said that on the day of Arafah, it is those who are الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ لَهُ. It is those who on the day of Arafah, on that day, they assume that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forgive them. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based on what we think of him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is based on the good impressions that we have on him. And when we continue to have these good impressions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would forgive us, his doors of forgiveness will continuously be open. Okay, so seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, practice a lot of remembrance. And speaking about remembrance, right, some of the things or some of the zikrs that you can practice also is as mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrated by At-Tirmizi about the best dua to recite on the day of Arafah. And it is also the dua that has been made by not just Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but also by other prophets as well. And here we see the dua that goes like this: La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika la, lahul mulku wa lahul hamdu wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Which means none has the right to be worshipped but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, who has no partner. He is the dominion, he is the praise, and he is able to do all things. So if there is any dhikr really that you want to practice, right, on the day of Arafah, this would definitely be it, because it is a dhikr and also a remembrance for us, right, to remember and to acknowledge the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is also a way on how we can praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to show gratitude for all the blessings that he has given us throughout the entire year, insyaAllah. Okay, so that will be point number 3. Point number 4, again, because it's the best day of the year, we are invoking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is also the best time for us to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make dua, right, in full certainty that Allah will answer us, Allah will hear us, and Allah will grant us with the best. Okay, so any dua that you have at that moment in time, make dua to the best of your ability and to your heart's content as well, insyaAllah.